And we're just going to make sure that it's recording. And here we go. So good afternoon, everybody. Happy Thursday. This is the training regarding Azure Labs for the CTE liaisons, although there may be instructors and principals in the crowd as well that won't be fulfilling that liaison role, but definitely want to be here. So thank you for coming. My name is Damiano. I work at the Brooklyn STEAM Center, and my role in the capacity of this training today is about supporting you so that way you can use this solution. Now, what is this solution? Some of them just appeared randomly in your inbox and you were like, all right, I'll show up. And others of you have been waiting with bated breath for this for over a month. So the Azure Labs solution is a virtual machine. It is a cloud-based computer software that runs a Windows computer in the internet. That's kind of like the layman's terms. So what does this mean? Students can use a variety of devices, and we'll talk about which ones are acceptable. There's a lot that students can use just with a basic internet connection to access a Windows platform that they can use the specialized software that we know your career and technical education programs need. These images have been created with the foundational software required by DIIT, but in combination with products like the Adobe Creative Cloud, the Autodesk Suite, and some other goodies. Now, to just really narrow in really quickly though, right now in phase one, this is only applicable for students and their instructors that are within the 3 career clusters that are supported by the Department of Education for architecture and engineering, computer technology, and the media tech and design. It's also just for seniors because those are the ones that have the most immediate need for this product. And so if you're teaching a senior class or you know that your senior students need access to this software, that is who this is for. With that being said, I know that many of you have questions about what type of software do you mean by specialized? And so what we've done is we've gone ahead and broken that down for you here on the screen by vertical. Now, if it is an internet or a web-based solution, such as something like Gmetrix or the Networking Academy from Cisco, those don't need to be installed. And so they still work in the platform through the web browser. You have the choice of Chrome or Edge. But for the programs you have to actually install for them to work, these are the ones that have already been pre-configured on your device. Now, it's important to note that schools are responsible for the licensing that comes with these products. So in terms of like the Autodesk products or the Creative Cloud stuff, students need to have their email address enabled through the portal, either at Adobe or Autodesk, to be able to use the software. Fortunately, we're able to use the New York City Department of Education accounts for the purposes of the Adobe materials, which will last through the year. And Autodesk is free for academic institutions. So if that hasn't been set up, that will have to be done prior. Other than that, some of the other software that's installed just works right out of the box. But for the most part, it's right there and ready to go. So what does this experience truly mean? So students will actually be able to log into this platform 24/7, but only for a maximum of 8 hours a week. So students get a quota, and that quota will prevent them from using it for more than 8 hours. If if we look at the fortunate side of things, this provides access and equity. If we look at the unfortunate side of things, this can get really expensive really quickly. And so we tried to use 8 hours as a good middle ground for people that typically offer double period classes in case you want to do live instruction with them on the software, but also give them a little extra time to do whatever small task or project that they are working on throughout the week. Students do not accumulate the quota. That would be a typo there on the slide. Students actually have their quota reset. And so say a student has used 4 of their 8 hours for this school week, next week on Sunday, it's going to reset back to 0 and they have 8 full hours for that week. When the quota is met, the VM stops. The good thing about the VM though is that it lasts. So if a student is saving data on there or they're stepping away from their computer and they shut it down properly, there's no worries. Their information will still be there. That computer, that lab is all theirs. The other thing to highlight in terms of limitations for right now, beyond who it's restricted for in this quota, is that there will be timeouts, but they're not turned on yet. And I know what you must be thinking, well, why? So the timeouts are really useful to maximize the amount of time that a student gets out of their quota. So if they fall asleep at their machine, or they do something like, break their computer and they can't shut it down, the timeout after 15 minutes would disconnect them. And then after another 15 minutes, just shut down. This would prevent additional time being held against the quota. But these settings were not turned on in the first 2 weeks for a few reasons. One, we didn't want to prevent students in the onboarding process to get locked out or timed out while they're trying to figure things out. The other part of it is that we really need them to get into the process of stopping them, because if you impart that practice of clicking stop and immediately stopping the quota instead of waiting for the timeout, students can maximize the amount of time that they can use the machine. Now, I know there's a lot of information here, but I promise, if you're the liaison, you've only got 2 jobs, and those things are here on the slides. The first role that we're going to talk about is the one that 99.99999% of liaisons will never need to do, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway, just in case. Liaisons have a special role in the labs.azure.com portal that you can use that allows you to reset a student's virtual machine. What the heck does that mean? If a student's computer crashes, there's a problem, all of their data gets corrupted, the VM won't launch, which is relatively impossible. So we'll call it rarely. There's the opportunity for the liaison to scrap the whole VM and rebuild it with a click of a button. Doing that will delete all of the student's data, but after about 20 minutes, the student will be able to log back in and use the program. It is a fail-safe. We do not think that the majority of liaisons will need to use this function, but in the event that a student's machine does in fact fatally crash, you can reset them. Of course, as your point person in support, and then ultimately the consultant engineer that will be supporting you, if there is a need for troubleshooting, you can definitely reach out. The other part, the other big thing, okay, about the liaison role are these registration links. So we will be sharing out to all liaisons the registration links used for students in the one-time, first-time process for students to claim their VM. And I'll break that down in a little bit, but essentially there's a specific link for a course code at your school, and you can either give that to your teachers and have them do it. You can push into a classroom and show them how to claim it. Or if you got that type of population, you can give all of the beautiful instructions to the students directly and just have them follow the steps. It's really on a case-by-case basis. And as a liaison at your school for this role, you are probably the best primed person to determine what's the best way to do that. There will be additional support material that I'll share with you in a bit that include like step-by-step instructions for all of these things that are professionally recorded beyond my scope. But there is also like the layman's version that we're going to be giving today. The one thing that's really important to note is that students have to use their nycstudents.net account in order to connect to this experience. So if your young people do not know what their username is, you can get that either from a STARS Classroom export, you can get it from STARS Admin export. There's a specific report code for that pulls it up with their biographical data. Or once you're logged in as the liaison, you can see the full list of students, which I'll show you in just a moment. Students will also need to know how to use the password. And so if they have never used the account before, they can use the information on the Teach Hub or Info Hub on the Department of Education's website that breaks down the process, because it's self-service. Students can reset their own passwords to their accounts really without any problems. They just need to know their ID number and their birthday. So what the heck does this look like? You said a whole bunch of words, but what do I actually need to do? So if you're the liaison at your school, you will be able to go to labs.azure.com. Okay. If you want to follow along, you can go for it, but that's totally up to you. When you go to labs.azure.com, you'll be able to sign in. You will sign in with your Department of Education ID, your schools.nyc.gov account. When you do so, okay, the screen will load looking a little something like this. I have a little bit more options than all of you, but I'll give you a school-based view just so that way you can see. So my school is 33K891. For you, your school will be the only thing that's listed in this dropdown, I promise. Inside, you will see the list of courses that specifically have access to this platform. If you have classes in your school where there are multiple sections, they were all grouped together. If you only have one, it should be right here. Inside the course is where you're going to get that registration link. Again, we will be giving you it in a spreadsheet form, but say you don't want to wait for the spreadsheet, you don't want to sift through it, you just want to get started now. You can also log in here and get that. Clicking on it, we get a whole bunch of information. That's a bit of hogwash. You don't need to look at any of it. It's not important. What we're going to go to is we want to go on down to the users tab. The users tab is going to show me which students have access to this lab using their nycstudents.net account. I can then get the registration link up here at the top. And that is what I will give to either the teacher used to push into that class to give to students. Okay, we will be doing this as part of the demonstration for the students. But in terms of the liaison role, if you're not going to be walking students and you're going to be giving this to teachers or students directly, this is where you would stop. You would just need this link to give to the class. The other thing the liaisons are able to do is reset those VMs, that thing that you should never, ever, ever do unless you really, really have to. So an example of resetting a VM could be in the same way where you're going to go into a specific course, but instead of clicking users, we're going to go to the virtual machine pool. And here we see all of our virtual machines, all of our labs, all of those things that they can connect up to on the internet. And I can see which students have claimed their VM. So you'll see their name and you'll see if they've been using it and things like that. If I need to reset their VM, I can go ahead over here and click the little refresh button known as the reset button. And it will tell you that we are going to reset this VM back to its default. So again, deletes all the student data. And they have to do the whole first time process again. With regards to that, we can then transition to the next piece. I am going to stop here momentarily though, just to ask if anybody has any additional questions that they want to unmute for.
Hi, this is Assistant Principal Hyde from Information Technology High School, and I have a couple of teachers who are in this training session, and where text messages are going back and forth. So, for example, I have one of my teachers, and he's asking that since we only have, did you say 7.5 hours?
So the quota is set to 8.
All right, so 8 hours, right? And students are working in the classroom, right, during the week. Most of the work that is being done for, let's just say, web design or video production students are done outside of the classroom, like homework assignments. So is there any way of extending that or?
So the quota is set based on like a general template
Yeah.
because the cost formula is based on how much you use the platform. It's also a good moment to just highlight that not every student has to claim a VM. This is an access opportunity for students that don't have devices they borrowed from the DOE, or
Right,
their home device just isn't strong enough.
right,
It really comes down to instructional decision whether or not they want to maximize the usage of the platform during a live session class time, or provide instruction in a way where students can do part of the work in class and then follow up with that more advanced work while they're at home.
right. And then just last question, because I know you said it's for seniors, but is there any way that I also have two other teachers who are in attendance? Is there any way that non grade 12 students can access this, or is it like really preset for grade 12?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. So the first one is that phase one specifically focused here on seniors. The phase two, if possible, will be based on the usage overall to then address the junior level, to go down a level. Of
Sure.
course, if you're in a circumstance where you know you're not going to use all the VMs, or the seniors are good already,
Mhm.
you definitely can email us and we can see what is possible, but we will have to go through a process to make sure that they get imported and that it's okay for the school to do that. But I don't want to just do a blanket no, because every school is unique.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
No
I
problem.
was just like, if I have a mixed class of juniors and seniors, and it's so kind of on the same lines as that.
Yeah, so there's kind of like an unspoken question in that statement. And that would be, what if I have students that are missing? Like if it's coded as the senior course and you have 11th graders, but they're in that class, like we can definitely add them. It's just a matter of, making sure that those that desperately need it because they're about to finish their CTE program get it, so they get the appropriate training and support and experience. So that way they can pass their certification exams, hit that program quality metric, and the other little boxes.
Hello. I hope this is not a dumb question. So I just to know what's exactly how it's working is the it's a cloud system that allows the student to access programs like Autodesk Inventor, even though they don't have it on the computer.
Yes.
And they can use iPad, or can they even use a phone to access it?
We're just about to get into that. Those are really
Oh,
great
okay.
questions, and I promise you are going to be quite satisfied with the answer.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. It seems like the new questions that are arising are regarding more of either experience or management, as opposed to the being able to reset or do the registration. So I'll just continue on. Please feel free to continue putting things in the chat. We have Chris, who's answering the majority of our questions, and he's one of our professionals that really knows his stuff about the platform. So how do students do this though? Okay, I showed you the aspect in the beginning, but like, what is the actual student experience here? So it's an 8-step process, and I know that sounds really scary, but in reality, it's only 4 steps. And the ones with stars, you only do once, the first time. So students have to use that registration link that we talked about just a moment ago to be able to claim their VM. They do that one time. So when they get that link, it's going to take them to labs.azure.com, and it's going to show them the Department of Education sign-on. Once they sign on with their Department of Education address, it automatically will link their account to a virtual machine. That only has to ever be done once. It will never show up again, even if they reset the VM. From then on, students exclusively log in at labs.azure.com using, again, that Department of Education address. From there, and there's a whole video demo that we're going to do, they will launch the VM. They click a little start button to tell the computer up in the sky, hey, I need you to turn on, please. And then they will use the application that's required to be able to actually connect. After that, they just have to authenticate themselves one more time, one more. That way they can say, hi, I'm a student and I need my internet, please. And it has to be filtered as according to law. But that's super easy because again, it's just a login with your DOE address and that's a one-time deal. That was a requirement set by DIIT, non-negotiable. After that, they can start using their software. If they have to log in using your school's address to get licensing through Adobe, or they need some type of code to be able to turn the software on, that's something that you can either walk them through or in a more advanced setting, do yourselves. And then when they're done, after they've used it for whatever project or task, they just make sure they click the stop button. So what does that actually look like though? We will get to that. But before we get to that, I wanted to address the question that was asked a little earlier about like, how do they actually access this? So there will be infographic documents that illustrate how to install this application on any type of device. The type of devices that are supported by the Microsoft Remote Desktop application, which is super small, so it'll fit on any device, is for Windows, Linux, Chromium, which includes things like Chromebooks, Mac OS, iPad OS, iPhone OS, and Android. The icon is there on the screen. There needs to be a clear division, though, between student-owned devices and Department of Ed-owned devices. If a student owns the device, they can just go through the regular quick process of installing the app. Most likely won't even go past step 3. They go to the website, they click install, they click launch. If they have a Department of Ed device, that's where it gets a little different. If you've loaned out Lenovo's to students or Dells that run Windows 10, they have the remote desktop application already installed. There's nothing you need to do. There is a very, very minute sized amount of devices that support Linux, but they are not DOE issued, so we don't have a problem there. Students that have Chromebooks that have been issued by the Department of Ed or will be using the Chrome browser will need to install it from the Chrome Web Store. Now that is typically blocked. However, those of you that are working on the centrally managed Department of Education Google Workspace will be added automatically. And if you are still using your school's private Google Workspace, previously known as G Suite, Chromebook management software, we can walk you through the steps to add that to all Chromebooks. It's a simple button you click to add in the dashboard for the administrators. iPad OS, if you own a DOE issued iPad from COVID, those things will automatically be pushed to their iPad devices by the end of this week. So students should see the app on their iPad. We don't give out phones, so that's not really a problem. But the last thing revolves around Mac OS. There is no way for us to unfortunately automate the process for us to impart or push this Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol app to their devices. So we are advising a few different options. Our official, most secure option would be students that are returning for blended instruction can get them installed when they visit the school. Students that may not be physically coming to the building, the next best solution would be to remote into their devices, and support for that will be provided. And then, of course, the last step is to walk students through it if they don't require administrative privileges to do so. So in reality, it does hinge on this, but I know that people from our pilot know that you can also access through the web browser, but due to the fact that that feature is only in beta, DIIT could not approve it for use in phase 1. Phase 2, maybe. Phase 3, possibly. But I can only talk about the now. So let's walk through that process again, and then we'll take some more questions. So if I'm a student, right, I'm the person that needs my VM. My first step is I need to register. I need to get my VM. Depending on the liaison strategy at your school, you might just email them the link. You might also push into the class. You might decide that the teachers will provide that link. Regardless, I can come into the portal as the liaison to get that link. I will copy this link. From the student experience, I'm just going to put it in at the top of my web browser, and I'm going to click enter. Now, if I do this, nothing's going to happen because I've already claimed the VM. But what students will see is a quick loading symbol, and then please log in with your DOE ID. When they do that, after they do that, students will then see this page that's loading now. It'll say, this is the lab that's been assigned to you. For them, they're only gonna have one, just one. And you'll notice that it's named by your DBN and your course code. So if you're my student, your virtual machine will be 33K891 TT whatever. It's irrelevant. It's just a naming scheme. When students reach this page, they now need to click the start button, okay? When they click the start button, what is happening is you're telling the web browser, hey, let the guy up in the cloud know I need you to turn on. I need the computer up there to start. It's advisable that you tell if you're going to use this in live synchronous time to do this in advance, because this process, although typically takes about a minute, can take up to about 4 minutes, maybe even 5. But this does not contribute to their quota time. It's only after it's in the start position. Meanwhile, while we're waiting for this to start up, I just wanted to share some additional information. The first thing is, some of you might be asking, well, I'm a teacher that uses a Mac, or I want to just be able to use this so I know the experience. This will be dropped in the chat in a little bit, but instructors that have the classes that are being affected, these senior groups, can also request their own VM to use. You will have a higher quota because, let's face it, teachers need to plan and not everything just happens in the classroom. So that quota will be higher, and we will institute the building of those VMs at the beginning, if not the middle of next week. In addition, like I said before, teachers want to be involved. They want to support their students. The best way for teachers to see the screens of a student's VM is in the meeting that they're using, Google Meet, Zoom, whatever. They can just share their screen of the VM. They don't have to share their entire desktop, so there's no issue of seeing any of the private stuff if they have it on their desktop. But in order to help them, they can just share their screen. The other option's a little bit more technical. If a teacher wants to do something for a student, like they want to make the change in Photoshop, they want to configure the asset panel in a specific way for the student, they can also use the file that I'll show you in a minute that you can download. But that will temporarily log the student out because only one person can be logged in at one time. The other thing that I just wanted to point out while we're waiting, because it should be done, it's running, but while we're here, is that there will be additional support. We'll have ongoing liaison training in case other teachers want to get involved or you just have questions. So this session will look much like this one, except at the end, there'll be questions for just about anybody. And you also have my email address. So if there's any problems, I'm here to help you until that consultant engineer gets brought on. In addition, we have BT Pros who work with Microsoft that will be providing those bite-sized videos for students, teachers, and the liaisons on everything that I've talked about today, including the informational graphics about how to install that little application on any of the supported devices. So we're back at the screen where we get to go to the next step. So I've registered my VM. That's a one-time, first-time deal. I've now logged into labs.azure.com, and I've started using the little toggle button, the ability for my VM to actually turn on. And you'll notice that the quota has actually started counting. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and click on this cutesy little icon. When I click this cutesy little icon, it's saying, hey, give me the information or the shortcut so that way I can connect to the machine up in the cloud. This is the step that you need to make sure that that application is installed, that remote desktop protocol client. When I go ahead and click on this, what's going to happen is it's going to automatically launch the connection to that device. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, but only after I switch to sharing my whole screen. Okay, so now we can see the whole screen, and I can go ahead and click on that. And you'll notice that the application then opened. And it's already configured. Students don't have to type in any super secret code. They don't need to try to figure out what they need to do in order to configure the workspace. That shortcut they downloaded does all the work for them. When they click continue, the only thing they have to do, and this is universal across all students to confirm their connection, is to put in the super secret password. So you need to tell your students, you need to tell your teachers, this is the super secret password. It's the word test, T-E-S-T, in all lowercase letters. That is true regardless of the student. And typically they only got to do it once. When they click continue, what is going to happen next is the system is going to now log in. It's going to go on up to the cloud and say, hey, buddy, I'm ready to log in. What's the deal? And you will notice that the experience has now looked exactly like a Department of Education computer. Click OK. It's going to log in me as a student. And then the experience is almost ready to go. So you may have remembered from my checklist, there's this funky thing called Zscaler. Zscaler is the fancy application that Department of Education uses to filter students' internet access, and that's a requirement due to federal and state law. So in order to do that, which isn't too bad, I promise, students will just need to come down here over to the task pane, okay, also known as the notification bar. And we're going to click the arrow to show our hidden items, and we're going to launch the Zscaler application. You'll notice that it's currently marked as disabled. If I open Zscaler up, we'll see that it's prompting me for a DOE login, okay? For students, this will be their New York City students.net account. For the Department of Education staff, teachers that are requesting use of this VM, they can go ahead and use their Department of Education account, again known as their schools.nyc.gov account. When this is done, which you only have to do the first time, one time, it will authenticate and allow you to go on the internet. It will also allow you to activate your software. From here, I can start using my products however I intended. If I'm using the Adobe products, for example, we can see that they're already installed here. And if I give it a good launch, it's going to start working. Now, I mentioned earlier that you do have to have the licensing to use the products. It's not a free run of whatever product you want to use. So your school will need to use their already existing licenses for the product. Department of Education officials can use it through their schools.nyc.gov account. But from the student perspective, it might look something like typing in their regular school email address that does have the permission to use these products and signing in from there. Beyond that, students can use any of the other applications. Teams has been installed, regular Adobe Reader has been there, and Chrome and Edge, just for your convenience to handle that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen to bring us back to the end of the presentation. That way we can address any additional questions or concerns related to this product. So please feel free to unmute or continue to write in the chat because I am here to support you.
Hi, I have a question. So
Sure.
considering that this is a cloud-based program, are there any concerns with multiple students using and accessing this all at once?
So that's a really great question. And so there really isn't, because the way the cloud solution is built, it's spread out across the Northeast. And so we most likely will not experience a degradation of service unless Microsoft themselves have a problem.
I had a question about, I believe like my school's license for Adobe was under the CS6 rather than the CC. Will that, that we had installed on the devices in the school, will that work with the Adobe suite if we don't actually have the CC, we just have them installed on?
Yeah, so my initial assumption would be no. However, Adobe has come under some creative ways to change that. So I would definitely suggest reaching out to an Adobe representative to figure that out. But if you do email me, I can put you into contact with my director of operations who had to do something similar.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any additional questions? I'm trying to open the chat. There's a good question in here. So what if I can't see any of my stuff? I'm the liaison and I logged in and I can't see nothing. So it really depends on when you opted in, because we've only run the liaison registration once. And so if you had not submitted that form prior to Tuesday, it's most likely why you weren't there. If you completed that form by 9 a.m. today, they will be doing an upload right about now. And so that might take a little time, but it should be available a little bit later. But if you registered past then, or you'd like to add additional people, you can send that information over with your DBN and school name and the DOE schools account. I can't use a school specific account to give you access. We can add you to that list for the next time they run the script. I also see another question in here about the class that I can see from the liaison view is not, in fact, my senior CAD class. I want to highlight, without being too negative about it, that academic policy is difficult. The way that courses are programmed in STARS is both confusing and tough to work with. And so we did have to take a type of assumption with what certain course codes meant. And we used the ending delimiter in the names of the course codes to figure out what would be the last course in the sequence. If you are experiencing an instance where the students are wrong or the wrong class was selected, please again send us a message and we will forward that over to DIIT to appropriately import the correct students and class.
I have a question. I was looking at this whole thing. We heard about this initially in our media commission meeting a couple days ago. And when I first saw it, I viewed it through rose-colored glasses, sort of naive. And now I was thinking, oh, wow, they're providing Creative Cloud, Autodesk, all that stuff. And you just mentioned and sort of popped my bubble that, of course, they need their own license. So thanks for that clarification. It's very important. Now, so that means then, and we do a group license. Well, I guess it's not a group at our school, but we have individual licenses that we give to the students. So they definitely have to have their license intact before any of this can happen. With respect to Adobe.
Yes. So this is like a bigger question here that started with, I believe, Mr. Curls, and is now being continued here and also in the chat, where Adobe previously issued product keys or license keys for a specific workstation, typically in the Creative Suite 6 and prior iterations. And they've now moved with the Creative Cloud, which is an online solution where as long as the product is installed and your email has the permission to use it, you can use it on any computer in the entire world. So what really happens is, like, if you're in a stuck or a loop between the device-based to user-based, that's something we can try to solve together in terms of like a separate conversation. But if you already know you're doing user-based at your school and that's how you do it with Autodesk, because that's how they've been rolling for the last 2 years. And if you've been doing that, or you were in the process of doing that for Adobe, it's just really making sure that the student email addresses, whatever one that you tell them to use when they log into Creative Cloud, has that permission.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I also wanted to highlight 2 more questions that are up in the chat. One of them is in response to instructions via email. So what is being provided to you almost immediately is this slide deck, the recording of the slide deck, and just some basic support information. What should be available within the next 2 weeks should be something more along the lines of instructional bite-sized videos and possibly the informational text about installing the application. It does take a bit to make those videos, so that's why I'm giving it an extended timeline. But if you get the gist of it and you need just additional clarification, you can always reach out to make sure that it is supported, that I can support you. The only thing I can't do is push into your classes and walk them through it themselves. There's another question in the chat also just about being able to increase quota numbers. I can double back and see if the 8 is, in the realm of permanence for students that have special needs. And I understand and completely acknowledge that students that specifically have those types of identifiers may have a restriction or may have some type of limitation in how well they can work within a given time limit. But it really comes down to the fact that we couldn't do unlimited because for every minute that this solution is on, it comes with a cost.
I have a question. Is this basically just a cloud service for kids to save work? Like if they're working with Adobe Premiere, for example, this is just a way for them to store things in a cloud service?
No, so this is not like Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox. It's not a solution space. Students can save their work to the virtual machine, but the primary purpose of this feature is that students that do not have access to the software that they need to do in your class to earn their certifications and do well on your projects can now do it because this is accessible from almost every type of device that's internet enabled. So although students can in fact save data to these VMs to work on projects like in Photoshop or Autodesk files or even Premiere projects for video editing, it is not a long-term save solution. On June 30th, all of these VMs will be in fact deleted.
Okay, so how do they access that through here? Because all I'm seeing is like things for architecture.
So there's architecture, there's media tech and design, and then there's computer technology software, which was grouped together from a poll that was issued to CTE educators. So we have the Adobe Creative Cloud for our media students, as well as Audacity. The computer technology students have the ability to use products like Cisco Packet Tracer, Wireshark, and Python through PyCharm. And then our engineering and architecture students have access to a lot of the Autodesk products, as well as Rhino. And then another question that arose from the chat in relation to your initial question was that students are encouraged, if not, it's a desired behavior that as they work on the products throughout the semester, that they then ultimately upload it to whatever learning management system you use, so that way they can submit work, and then also save it to a space like OneDrive, Google Drive or Dropbox, so that way they can permanently keep their work should they choose to do so.
Okay, because where would I find things for Adobe? Because I just don't see it. I'm working on.
So as the liaison, you can't actually open up a VM to start using. If you want to request one, you definitely can, and I'll put that link up on the screen for all of you. And that will give you the ability to do the same experience students have. This will also be included in the follow-up email. But when students are logged into the VM, just like when I showed you that Windows screen with that folder, the folders are organized by media tech and design, engineering, and computer tech, and they would find the applications in there.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, do we get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Oh, great.
I just had a quick question. Being an Adobe Suite user for a while, but never using it on a phone or type of device. Does anyone have experience with that, and what the challenges? Because I know there are certain programs that aren't conducive to a touch screen rather than a traditional laptop or desktop.
Yeah, so two things in regards to that. The first thing is a little bit more generalized, but the second one will be more practical for you. So with regards to using a touch screen or an iPad to connect, when students are holding up their device, their input with their finger is like a mouse. So it's not really going to change the experience because the product isn't on their device, it's up in the cloud. But I do understand what you mean when you're talking about like the ability to be very specific in your pointing and the ability to type and like how the keyboard could get in the way. So although it's not the best solution, students can also, and depending on whether the school wants to use their budget for it, and I use budget in quotes because I know that we are running out of money, there are adapters that go to devices like iPads that allow you to connect a keyboard, which allows you to connect a mouse. And that will actually give you a cursor and the ability to type while you just sit there with your screen right in front of you. And so those are more accessible alternatives in case they don't have just like a regular computer. Because any device that can hold that remote desktop application can connect. They just need the internet access, which is pretty typical. It's a standard. It even works over a mobile connection as long as it's stable.
I might be able to speak to that just a little bit. Mr. Curls, I think it's Mr. Curls, right? As you might know, Adobe released a Photoshop version for iPad Pro. And so that's not too old, maybe less than a year, maybe 6 months. And so they must have figured out a whole routine for taps and slides and all the gestures that are conventional for an iPad. And so a lot of our students are on DOE iPads, which of course are not iPad Pro, and that's where this would come in. So I'm just just an educated guess saying that Adobe's routines for iPad Pro would translate to DOE iPad. And all of that's going to be abundantly documented online. I mean, I found those kinds of things recently for other kinds of apps on iPad.
Thank you.
Who knows what it will be like for the phone?
If I could actually interject here, so this solution uses the Microsoft Remote Desktop application, and I am actually somebody who uses Microsoft Remote Desktop on my iPad when I travel a lot. What the experience is actually like is you have two options. So you can put the iPad into what's called mouse mode, and basically it uses your finger on the screen like a trackpad. So you kind of just move your finger around and then double tap, and it double taps the mouse, and you'll see the mouse move around. Or you can put it into touchscreen mode, and when you do that, that'll support double tapping on icons, so the mouse disappears. You can just double tap on icons. It'll support point and the pinch to zoom and stuff like that. So it really depends on what mode you put the iPad into specifically, and that same follows over to Android and iOS device applications as well. So there'd be an iPad, an iPhone, or an Android device. It's just the Microsoft Remote Desktop application that's actually doing that. So I hope that clarifies that a little bit for you.
Okay, thank you. You just had, never really used it on a touchscreen device and know how sensitive.
Yeah, it can either make the iPad act like a Surface device or just any touchscreen device, or it can put it in and make the iPad screen just one giant trackpad.
Okay, so we will be taking additional questions if they're there. And I just want to take a moment to thank Chris for not only just that answer, but the plenty of ones that were in the chat. But Ronald's asking a question about, so what are my next steps? What the heck do I need to do? I sat here, I loved it, like I want to use it, or at least I want to try it out. So step one is to make sure that somebody in your school, most likely you because you're here, have liaison access. I would say that no later than by Monday, you should have liaison access. But of course, if nothing's there, you can feel free to send me a message. After getting the liaison role and you log into labs.azure.com, you can start pulling those registration links. I think most schools have three links in total, if that at all. And you decide. If you need to have a meeting with your school leadership to figure out the best way to roll it out, that's what you got to do next. If you are the type of person that's allowed to just talk to teachers and jump right into their classrooms, go ahead and do that. The product as it stands has already been implemented. It's just a matter of the user doing that step process that we've illustrated as part of the demonstration for today. So Jared's asking a really good question, one that comes up every session, and that's totally necessary. So this expires in June at the very end. So in June, all of the VMs will be deleted. All student data will be gone. And most likely, most of those students, if not all of them, will have graduated. So what is the long-term effect of this? Well, I can't give you any definites, but I can tell you what has been told to me. So this solution came out as a need for CTE, but the chief technology officer heard about it, loved it so much, and wants to know if we could do it for all middle school and high school students. So there is a potential, I'm not saying a definite, but there is a potential of figuring out how schools can utilize this for any solution that they need to for their classroom needs, not just CTE. That will cost a lot more than what it does now, but it really just depends on what we needed to do. Right now, also just to highlight, through June, for the students that have already been imported and for those that were mistakes that need to be updated, that cost is being covered by Central. But beyond that, I don't know, probably not. But that's just me personally speaking.
And I'll also add to the mix, hey everybody, Jessica Kemper from the CT Central team. That there's, like Damiano said, there's a lot of buy-in and interest of this on various leadership members of the Office of Post-Secondary Readiness, where the CT team sits underneath. But I think what I want to share with you is that what will be really compelling about continuing this in the next year is if the usage numbers demonstrate that, wow, we put this option out there and students really used it and teachers really used it. So we really want to, ask you for your help in, encouraging your students to use this, taking the next step with them, because if not only do we understand this is a real equity issue, but if the data shows it as well, like it addressed an issue and students used it, it'll be very compelling about continuing this in the next year. So for example, we're going to be looking at usage reports on a pretty regular basis and sharing that with leadership members, and hopefully we can make a really strong argument for the next year.
And it just one thing, now that they've kind of switched to failing grades to an NX and giving students extra time that are running out in June, we wouldn't have that option to give the students that extra time to make up the incomplete over the summer, or I'm guessing. Which is, I'm sure we've all experienced the new NX, okay, we'll give you extra time to, under the circumstances.
Was that a question or?
It just occurred to me. I'm
just
like,
sharing out. Okay, got it.
Yeah, how many? Just from my newer experience with, it's the end of the term or thing, and you don't have to work, and we'll give you that. But if it ends at the end of June, I guess we'll have to figure out a work around. So.
Yeah. And Jared, I saw that your comment in the chat too, and I think it's a really good point. We've had conversations about this. We've heard feedback from teachers that while it's great to be prioritizing seniors, maybe at this point in their academic year, we may not see as much usage as we would want to. So we want to kind of keep the door open for you if you want to considering other grades as, maybe welcoming some juniors into this, or sophomores or freshmen. So we'll leave the door open for you to explore that with us.
I think that's good because honestly, a lot of the kids that we had technical issues, we've already addressed at this point. And like even some of the software, like we've already kind of moved away from using in some cases because it wasn't able to be used on everybody's devices. So when I was asking before about, is this something for like the future too, is like, I feel like our school would probably do like a pilot type of thing just to see what it could do. And if it's going to give a few kids access that maybe need it that otherwise wouldn't have it. But to do it on anything like large scale, I feel like that probably won't happen until like you start fresh next year. So if like you're relying on like big usage numbers, I don't know if that's going to happen like right out of the gate, you know, with like 2 months left in school. So
Yeah, good point. I'm noting that, and I can appreciate what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah, to echo that, I do think that if this was maybe rolled out to test with juniors, we would have a lot more usage. Feel like the seniors at this point have pretty much kind of checked out of school for them to be a guinea pig on this new platform.
Yeah, I feel like there's a few things to acknowledge, and all the things that have been said are valid, but the thought process was that juniors will have another year, seniors won't. And then on top of that, typically, not always, but typically, the CTE technical assessment, aka the certification, is offered at the end of the program sequence. So those who really needed the training, those who really needed the software, were in those senior cohorts. But again, like Jessica shared, and which was asked about earlier, if you feel like there's another group that would better benefit from this and you can remove your seniors from the table, we're not closing that door. Definitely reach out to us so that way we can see what's possible. And also just acknowledge the fact that this also isn't a all or nothing deal. You don't need every single student to be logged into the platform for, to be considered heavy usage. If you get a handful of students in the platform and they're using as many of their hours as they can because they don't have devices at home, that's going to be more favorable than it would be like, oh, we got everybody on there, but only one person's using it. But yeah, definitely could go in 100 different directions about like what this could have been. But being a project that required so many moving parts, we kind of had to limit scope, especially since we had a finite amount of money and also resources.
Damiano, because this came up yesterday, can you also explain that the fact that this is not for technical assessments?
Yeah, great question. And so this actually also appeared in the chat. And so this product, the Azure VMs, are not designed for students to take their certification exam. The Compass, Consulate, and other software like the Pearson VUE platform have not been installed on this platform. It is not validated or accepted by those testing partners to issue certification exams in that manner. Pearson VUE that owns Certiport actually has their own virtual machine connection protocol for their own testing protocol. And so you really have to adhere by that. That's also true for things like Nocti and other providers. You have to go by what their requirements are, not just if it's possible. So although I can say that it's technically possible, it's not appropriate to do so, but it is for practice, it is for working on projects, it is for students that can't get to the software any other way, it is for those remote students that just have an iPad at home. And for those of you that are like, well, how am I going to do my certification testing? Pearson VUE Certiport are doing tested homes with no added cost through the rest of the school year. Nocti is charging through their ProctorU platform, but if you can set up a safe and healthy environment after school, you can utilize the new guidance from the extended permit use that came from Central that enables you to offer CTE exam certifications after school to invite those remote students in. And of course, you can use typical class time, if applicable, to also have students sit for the exam. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I know that it is not the ideal, but it will certainly change the lives of at least a group of students that wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise. I'll stay if you have any other questions, but I am going to stop the recording.